This is the DRS train.
Welcome to the DRS Train podcast. No Peter instrumental intro today, it's only me, NavF1. And for this Christmas special, we have decided to share our insights with a new guest, Blue Guy, but I'm also joined with co-host Nedzo and returning contributor Aishale. We will be talking about the 2024 rookies and the 2025 rookies just to have an idea of what you guys can expect. How are you guys?
Hello.
Hello. You can go ahead, Aishio.
Okay, so today we wanted to talk about the rookies of next year, but we saw we already saw plenty this year, and I thought it was best to start from the best rookie of the year, which is the one who got the most lucky drives this year, and so Oliver Bearman, who got to race out of pure luck 3 times, and all 3 times he was impressive. And but since it is Bearman, I will allow Nedzo to open up because he is the biggest Bearman fan.
So he comes in to Jeddah, a track he's never driven. I know he has driven it before. Sorry, he drove it in F2 last year. What an idiot! A car he's never driven before, and it's arguably the hardest track to get used to and drive in Formula One. And he comes in and has 40 minutes practice, qualifies only half a second away from Charles Leclerc in Q2. Admittedly, doesn't get into the last qualifying session, but it was less than a tenth away. And then he not carves his way, but makes his way up through the pack and finishes 7th. Pretty much, don't get me wrong, he could have been quicker, but by the end of a race, he was basically not on Leclerc's pace, but only 1 or 2 tenths away. And for me, while obviously he hasn't completely equaled his teammates' pace, like for example Colapinto did with Albon, considering how Leclerc's done this season, I believe that is arguably maybe not the performance of the season, but it's up there in terms of the top 10 racers of any driver this season. To go with that, then at Baku he outqualified Hulkenberg, and although he was behind him, and although there and thereabouts during the race, capitalized when Hulkenberg couldn't, when that Perez and Sainz crash happened. And then in Brazil, it took for him to be on a track he'd never driven before, in a car he wasn't used to, in conditions he wasn't used to, on the wrong tyres in the race, especially when they were all on intermediates and wet conditions. It took for all of that for him to look like he was out of place. So for me, Ollie is undoubtedly the rookie of the season. And I put him, when I just posted an article grading every single 2024 F1 driver's performances over the course of the season. And I'm for the guys like Lawson and Colapinto, I averaged out their performances so that they weren't disadvantaged by just doing less races. And I put Bearman 6th in my overall ranking of all the drivers that competed this season.
Yeah, when he first made his debut in Saudi Arabia, it was quite unexpected. And I was wondering if he would do any good. He was going to do. I was wondering if he was going to do great in that Ferrari. It wasn't. It wasn't the best qualifying performance, but I think he did well to beat the likes of Hamilton and Norris. But at the time, I felt the British media was praising him a bit too much. He did well in the Ferrari, but he wasn't a world beater. He didn't beat Leclerc. And in Azerbaijan, he did well in the Haas. That's all I can say about that. And in Brazil, he was just terrible in the wets, and I didn't really expect much of it. Nobody expected him to take over that season, given that Kevin Magnussen was unwell. But he really did a good job, and I'm hoping to see how he fares with Ocon in 2025.
Okay, so let's say the entire story in Jeddah. He did have the Friday on the Formula 2, and then he set pole position. So let's not forget that. He's not completely never driven the track. Mm-hmm. And he had to give up a pole position in Formula 2, which is very little for getting to drive a Formula 1. But, one of the few times this year he was going to have a good weekend in Formula 2, and it just gets taken away. A bit of a shame. If it had happened like in Bahrain, like best position possible, because in Bahrain it was awful, the Prema as a whole. And so still excellent for Bearman. And I want to point out what is that made Bearman so good this year, because let's be real here. Bearman's strength is not raw speed. Bearman's strength is not racecraft. His strength is that he came in and was immediately reliable. So in a wet, Hülkenberg spun off, was disqualified, was going to retire. And instead, Bearman got to the end, 12th place. Nothing to write home about, but he did not crash, which is much more than Colapinto, Albon, Alonso, Stroll, Sainz, who else? There are many others. In Azerbaijan, he got a bit lucky because Hülkenberg made a mistake, but he still beat Nico. And then in Jeddah, well, he got to the end. That's plenty enough for your first race. And as Nedzo explained, he was quite fast toward the end of the weekend. And so it's not really raw speed, it's not really racecraft. The fact is, he was put suddenly in a car 3 times in a row, and all 3 times he was immediately reliable. You expect that out of a Carlos Sainz, you expect that out of a Max Verstappen, you expect that out of a Fernando Alonso, you expect that out of a Pierre Gasly. You don't expect it out of a rookie. Even Colapinto, even Lawson, they all had their moment of crashes. Bearman didn't. And so that's what really made Bearman good, because how many rookies did we ever have that came in right away and they were reliable? That's a great sign for a rookie, being reliable. It's much less important for an experienced driver, but for a rookie, very, very good sign.
And another thing I wanted to
So, no, but exactly, Bearman, he showed adaptability and he showed reliability, which is exactly what you wanted in that position. And also, we must remember he's the youngest ever Ferrari driver. He was 18, and Ferrari trusted him. Ferrari did have other options. Well, I'd say one other option in Robert Schwartzman, and I don't think that Schwartzman was there, so I don't know if that had an impact on the choice. But regardless, his adaptability was obviously impressive enough for Haas to call him on later on. So that is, as you said, I think his biggest strength. Now I would like to see how much he improves in the rainy conditions, because again in Brazil he was struggling, and I think that's clear.
Okay, sorry if I interrupted you, Nav. Anyway, I mean, he could have done a Nick de Vries or a Mick Schumacher. I mean, he could have performed badly, but he did perform well in the Ferrari and in the Haas. And at the time, we thought that he would be the only rookie in that grid, given that after the first 2-3 races, 2024 would be a repeat of the 2023 season. But I mean, he did show some promise, and I think he's able to adapt well. And let's see what else he can do. Unless anyone else has anything to say about Bearman.
So, of course, we kind of skipped his entire Formula 2 season. There were 10 races. He raced in at least 8 of them. No, more than 10 races. That's Formula 3, that's 10. Formula 2 must have 14 races. And so he raced at least 12 of them. We're completely going to skip over Formula 2, imagine, unless anybody has something to say. Because luckily he got 3 races in Formula 1. And so automatically Formula 2 doesn't matter. If he didn't, his Formula 2 season would have been pretty underwhelming. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So what were you going to say, Blue Guy?
I was going to say that his 2024 Formula 2 season wasn't that great. I mean, in the standings, if you take a look at it, he was a bit he was behind Kimi Antonelli, which we will talk about later. But in this first season, in 2023, I think he did well. I mean, he was the first, if not one of the first drivers to win a sprint race and a feature race in the same weekend. But his Formula 2 campaign in 2024, I mean, despite his wins, I mean, I have nothing to say about that, but it's great for Komatsu to say that he doesn't care about the standings. So despite that, I mean, Bearman did well, and that's all I have to say about it.
to clarify your point on Baku, it wasn't just the sprint race win and the feature race win. He also got P1 in qualifying and P1 in practice. He was the first driver to do that, I think, in either GP2 or F2, which, considering the likes of Hamilton, Rosberg, even newer ones like Piastri and Russell haven't done that, and that's bloody impressive.
Exactly. So with Bearman, we can really say that his season this year was a success, mostly because simply Haas wouldn't have taken him on if they didn't trust him with regards to his pace. As you said, Blue Guy, he only ranked 13th or 14th in Formula 2. So if you're going to take a guy like this, it's that you obviously know that that wasn't representative of his real pace. But talking about Formula 2 standings that do not represent real pace, Colapinto as well, he was taken up to Formula 1, promoted to Formula 1 after a few races in Formula 2. I think it was 6 or 7 weekends. And at that point, he was only 7th or 6th in the Formula 2 standings. And yet, Colapinto proved to be a real surprise and a real breath of fresh air, really, because just to quote Mika Richards, he burst onto the scene and he provided so much entertainment on track, off track, and in social media. He was the talk of the town in on every single aspect. Whether you wanted to see him or not, he was there. He was getting several girlfriends, and then he was getting involved with several people's wives, and then 10 sponsors were coming, and all the South American millionaires wanted to sponsor him. And then it kind of just tailored off, didn't it?
It did kind of just tail off. Him coming in Monza, I think it was, and instantly being on basically Albon's pace, and people were like, "What on earth is going on here?" For me, that was incredible. It kind of does put into perspective just how maybe not bad, but average Alex Albon has been over the past couple of seasons. Aside from the fact that he's had 2 terrible teammates, maybe it does explain how Nick de Vries could be fantastic and look fantastic in a Williams, but look utterly awful in an AlphaTauri. It does kind of make sense that maybe de Vries wasn't good and that Williams was just a lot better than we thought it was at Monza. But aside from that, going back to Colapinto, his first couple of weekends, you look at him and you go, this guy's a future champion. This guy's a potential future champion. But by the time the end of the season had come around, maybe not Abu Dhabi, but at least Las Vegas and Qatar, you think, at what point do these crashes just become like the norm? And like, it's all good if you can win, or if you can beat your teammate, or if you can equal your much more experienced teammate. But if you're just bidding it every other session and costing your team millions in crash damage like he did, you do have to get to a point where you think, is it worth it? I mean, I think for me, this is what I said. If contracts didn't exist and if loyalty and stuff didn't exist, if I was Williams, I'd have picked Colapinto to go alongside Carlos, not just for the performance, because I think his season overall was better than Albon's, despite his less numbered races. The fact that he is a marvel in the Hispanic markets, and Carlos is starting to take over from Fernando, because Fernando's not performing well, and Fernando is going to, regardless of how much he wants to stay on, he's going to die out within the next 5 years in terms of Formula One. So to have those two in Formula One together as teammates, Sainz and Colapinto, will be perfect for the Spanish markets. But yeah, his season overall, it started off really well, did taper off towards the end, but I don't think that would perhaps mean that he doesn't deserve a seat in F1. I hope that he gets that seat over at Doohan, because there's been talks that he'll be taking that off of Doohan. He definitely deserves it more than he does. But yeah, he's come in, got loads of MILFs, got loads of girlfriends, and yeah.
Well, before Blue Guy jumps in, I just want to kind of nuance on you saying Alonso is getting a bad season. He didn't have a bad season. He was just a bit anonymous, but that was a very big exaggeration to say that Alonso's performing poor. Anyway, Blue.
What you said about Colapinto's crash, I think it really did hurt Williams financially, because keep in mind that Williams is now a small team, and in the budget cap era, any crash that a driver has in a small team can hurt them financially. I mean, Williams already lost a lot of money because of Logan Sargent's crashes, but it's just hurt them financially, and it kind of did hurt Colapinto at the same time, because this was a talent that I thought that he was going to do well and he deserved to be in Formula One. When he made his debut in Monza, I wasn't sure what to make of this guy. And the first 3 races, he was already on the pace, and he was able to be, if not be close to Albon. And this was something that I noticed, that like he was bringing so much sponsors to that team, and unfortunately, I think it got to him, and I think he became a bit overconfident, if you want to call that, because the crashes did not help his reputation. But Colapinto is not a bad driver. He is good. I didn't really pay attention to him in Formula 2 because I didn't watch F2, but when he made it onto the grid, he was just amazing. And it did prove that Albon is in fact a mid driver, and all it took was some competition to get onto his level. But I do hope to see him in the future. But my advice to Colapinto is to calm down and be a little bit patient, because this is not a Ferrari he is driving. He is driving one of a backmarker cars, and he needs to be careful, especially during the budget cap, cost cap era.
So about the budget cap, allegedly, rumors say that Williams has broken it this year. Like
Oh,
they
yeah, I
couldn't
heard.
respect the budget cap with all these crashes, and furthermore, they had to stop the development of the 2025 car because they didn't have the money. And also, this is a big problem because they have to design the car and they have to choose the rear suspension, which they take from Mercedes. And so either they had to wait the 2025 suspension design, which means they could start to develop the car late in the year. And if they did this choice, they're fucked because they can no longer develop the car.
Yeah.
If they had chosen the 2024 design, which was already available, then they've chosen a bad rear suspension. I don't know how many heard the rumors, but apparently the rear suspension of Mercedes this year sucks very much. And Mercedes and Aston were using it and both struggled. And then, or they use the 2023 suspension of Mercedes, which is obsolete, like complete obsolete. 2 years is an eternity. So Williams is screwed on all fronts. I don't know how much Sainz can do to recover that.
The
And
last time, oh sorry,
no, go
go
on.
ahead, go ahead. You
And
finish what
so
you had to
I
say.
I was just gonna say about Colapinto because I really have nothing to say against his crashes, against his performance at the end of the year. I mean, you've got to understand, he crashed once, no spare pieces. He has to revert to the old version of the car, which is slower, and that means he's off the pace immediately. And look, he crashed once and completely ruined his the rest of the year. And how many drivers are in such a tight spot? Not many. So I forgive him for that. On every other front, he was competitive straight away, fairly reliable until he started crashing. And so, really, what more can you ask out of a rookie? The other choice that Williams had was Mick Schumacher, which I think on every account possible was a better choice at the time it was made. And we basically have been proven wrong because whatever Mick Schumacher would have done, yes, he would have brought the same amount of points. Maybe he would have crashed less, but we must remember Mick is still a bit crash prone in 2022. No reason to believe he would have been this year. And of course, Mick Schumacher would have costed more as a salary than Colapinto. So, and he wouldn't have brought the sponsor that Colapinto brought. So, on every account possible, choosing Colapinto was a success, even with all the crashes he made.
The last time a team sacrificed the last year of the current regs and focused on the new regs was Haas.
I'm just gonna stop the Colapinto hype and cover this. So the Formula 2 was weird this year. So if anybody remembers, at the start of the year there was massive hype behind Formula 2 because there were a lot of excellent junior rookie drivers that were coming in. And then there were a lot of expectations. There was the new kind of car. So really a lot of excitement. And Formula 2 was disappointing this year. We had a very unreliable engine. with lots of, a few reliability issues, but the main issue was the start. People kept stalling. Just stupid rule, do not have the app installed in Formula 2. This is the main issue, but still, even if it wasn't reliability, it is a long story that the Mechachrome engine they're using in Formula 2 is not, how do you say? It has a too wide a range of performance. So the same producer, Mechachrome, let's say it's 22 drivers, 2 engines for the year, so they produce around 50 engines a year. And these 50 engines are not exactly equal in the power they generate, so they have different horsepower. And from the best to the worst engine, it's too much different. So these engines are allocated randomly. The issue is that it is basically down to luck to whichever driver gets the good engine, and therefore will have an advantage for at least half a year. And which driver gets a bad engine, which means he just can barely scrap by the points for half a year. And so that completely ruins a year. And there are in place mechanisms to avoid this. So basically, if a team believes their engine is underpowered, they can request from Mechachrome a tench best to check the actual power generated. And if the power generated is found to be under a certain limit, they get to replace the engine for free with a new one. And again, a random roll on its performance. And the issue, allegedly, is that these stench bests suck. And so they're completely unreliable. And so it is not worth it for the teams to actually pay Mechachrome to check the engine because they don't have reliable results. So it's a complete mess, Formula 2. And on top of this mess with the engine, there were the new cars, which brought a new mess. That is, teams have a different understanding of the cars, and so different teams have different performance across the year. So you have what is supposedly an even playing field, which absolutely is not even close. And so all this hype behind these rookies, and some driver got screwed, other drivers didn't get screwed. You just cannot judge the performance of a year, which is the other reason behind why we judge Bearman very well, despite having quite a bad Formula 2 year. That is, Formula 2 doesn't matter because you cannot take anything away quite reliably. We had Formula 1 lucky, we had Colapinto, we had Bearman, we had Doohan, we had Lawson, which are good benchmark for the current rookie drivers. And so we can judge them fairly on that. But if we didn't have all these lucky appearances, this entire Formula 2 field would have been wasted. And that's incredibly sad.
I agree with you, but to be fair, you can kind of gauge a driver in wet conditions, for example. So Antonelli's race in, you would know, was it Hungary? Where he
Silverstone.
won in the rain? Silverstone.
British Grand Prix, the sprint
Yeah.
race.
Yeah, so in the wet conditions, you can still kind of see, and to put some examples of what you said, I think High Tech and AIX Racing were the two teams that were most regarded as the ones who were getting an engine bonus. So Paul Aaron, especially in the first half of the year, just kind of was faster on the straights, and Joshua Dirksen, the Paraguayan driver, who was wholly unimpressive in Freca, 10 positions behind Antonelli. He won sprint races. Did he win a feature race? Or
I
did I
think he
make
might
that
have
up?
done. I can't remember which one, but I think he has done at least one.
But he definitely got feature race podiums. So AIX and Hitech were seen as the ones who were getting better engines for sure, and that's a real shame. And to keep on going about Colapinto just for one more little segment, do you guys think we will see him back on the grid in a full-time capacity at any point? And if so, where would that be? Because the only new team that is joining is Cadillac, and I do not see Cadillac having any real incentive. So where do you think he could end up? Is it that Alpine rumor where it seems like Doohan is in a real hot seat?
I think that Williams is still an option because if, for example, Sainz gets a better option for 2026, he's not going to stay at Williams. They could easily just have Colapinto come in at the end of one season with Sainz. And even if Sainz stays there 2 seasons, Colapinto's what, 21? He could easily pop in a Williams in 2 years' time and be fine. Alpine is still an avenue if, for example, Doohan does awfully and they want to get a mid-season replacement who they know is going to be quick. But that means he'll have to cut his ties with Williams because Williams wouldn't let him loan out to a potential, because considering where Williams and Alpine are, they could be considered rivals next season. So you don't want to be loaning out your talents to another team. I think that Colapinto does definitely have a place on the F1 grid. It's just whether he can get it. Like, unlike the guys like Drugovic, who everyone thinks deserves an F1 seat for some reason, he's actually proven himself, and he's proven what he can do, and he deserves a seat in F1, but there are only 20 seats and will only be 22 seats by the time 2026 comes around. So there isn't really enough, unless what some of the stinkers go. He's not really going to get a chance unless a seat opens up at Williams, realistically.
I mean, what you just said was completely valid. While I would like to see him on the grid, I mean, I just fear that he's gonna be destroyed and he's gonna go the same path as Nick de Vries and as Mick Schumacher and other drivers who have so much potential. But if he was to come back to the grid, yeah, I would definitely say Williams, given that Carlos Sainz apparently has a clause that allows him to get back to a top team. So, and given that he has driven for Williams this season, he would be used to the environment and hopefully learned his lessons. And what else did I want to say? Yeah. Another, of course, if Doohan is bad, he could go to Alpine. But right now, Williams is the best place for him, and I think it could do him justice.
So I hope to see him again. I quite like Colapinto. I think that he could find a place in Alpine, just maybe. It depends with how it goes with Doohan, and nobody knows how it will go because there is the man Flavio Briatore there, with his unpredictability. So really, even if there is no clear path for him to get back to the grid right now, I'm sure in 1 year it will be completely different.
Well, that's a good round there. My one issue with Colapinto is that we do need to bear in mind that the Argentinian fans are absolutely insane. And you might have seen a few days ago that Colapinto won the overtake of the year for what is the most basic overtake I might have seen this entire year. It was a DRS overtake on Alonso where he just dived to the inside and went past. The commentary was just, and Colapinto goes past his much senior, I don't know, something didn't say compatriot, much senior friend on the grid, whatever, and this is yet another proof of Colapinto growing. So the fact that Colapinto got overtake of the year shows that if we have him on the grid as a permanent addition, he might get driver of the day 20 times. Anything you want to add? I was going to call you Ollie, Nedzo.
I don't know why you'd call me. I mean, we have had times where F1 has taken away Driver of the Day awards from drivers who clearly got them either through troll. Like, for example, they had it with Mazepin in, I think it was Spain in 2021, and they quietly didn't release the Driver of the Day results until like 20 minutes after the race ended, and it was like Perez, and no one thought that Perez deserved it. And I think
in 2016, just to add on this, in 2016, Harrianto was meant to be the driver of the day in every single race he entered, and of course he didn't.
Yeah, that was the Indonesian fans. So I think obviously, but on a logistical sense, he won't get driver of the day 20 times in a row. But to be fair, Colapinto's Argentinian fans aren't as crazy as some other Argentinian fans in other sports. Like, for example, we had Agustin Canapino in IndyCar, and like his fans were sending death threats to other drivers. But I think because Colapinto actively detests that sort of fan behavior, I think that it doesn't really spill off into it. And because he's actually a good person, I don't think that would happen. I don't think that would happen. Although, yes, you're going to have some things like fans voting for an overtake award, but an overtake award is harmless. No one actually gives a fuck about it. Let's be real. It's one of those awards that's just like, oh, it's another award for us to hand out and flog to fans at the end of the season when no one actually gives a shit.
And get some interactions on social media. So yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, given that you talk about Ollie Bearman so much, we have the right to call you Ollie. Anyway, about the overtake of the year. I mean, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I have a feeling that they're doing that just to please a certain fan base. I can already think of many overtakes that was a lot better than that. Take Canada 2024 for example. Even though Albon crashed out later on, his overtake just before the start finish line was actually great, and I feel that it should have been the overtake of the year because nobody overtakes like that in the rain unless your opinion differs. But I felt that this was the overtake of the year.
Well, exactly, Blue Guy. Most people, the consensus was that Albon should have won it, and it was pretty. I'd say it was a pretty unanimous view that Albon deserved it. Well, moving on to the other half rookie on the grid, we don't even know what to call him anymore because he's had 3 or 4 races in 2023. He's had 7 races in 2024, and next year he's in Red Bull. So go figure how that works out. Liam Lawson will be at Red Bull for 2025 for his first full season, which is kind of incredible because even though we've known him for a while now. If you follow motorsport, you've known him for a long while, and even if you just follow Formula One, you will have heard his name just been thrown about during the last few years. And then obviously he did get his breakthrough last year, and now he's going to be at the debut race in 2025, driving for what will for sure be one of the fastest cars next to the guy who is for sure the fastest driver. So what do we make of the promotion, firstly, of Lawson to Red? Well, actually, no. What do we make of Lawson's season in 2024, firstly, which some stats says, I think in quali he was beaten 7-0 by Yuki, and in the races he was beaten 5-2. I believe he only scored 4 points to Yuki's 8 over the same period. So what do we make of this before we look at his Red Bull promotion, Blue Guy?
I mean, the last time a driver joins a top running team in his first season is Hamilton in 2007. But the thing is, I wouldn't call Liam Lawson a rookie because he has been in Formula One for a couple of races. Like he already has some experience, but it's a top team nonetheless. Liam Lawson has some races where he was fearless and it was just challenging drivers. In the US Grand Prix, when he replaced Daniel Ricciardo, I think he qualified badly, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. And while Yuki Tsunoda was spinning like a spinning top, I think Lawson was able to make his way onto the grid and had the best finish of his. He had this best career finish in his seasons. My grammar and vocab is just over the charts right now, but hopefully you understood what I was trying to say.
That's absolutely fine. We understand what you're trying to get at. That's fine. But yeah, but the way I see it is Lawson's 2024 season was actually more underwhelming than his 2023 season because in 2023 he had performances like Singapore where he out-qualified Verstappen and looked to be at points much better than Yuki, and you think actually this kid is really good. And then 2024 he kind of didn't show that. The way I'd see it is, nonetheless, it was still better than Ricardo, which is a bar so low to clear that he doesn't even require the effort of jumping. But nonetheless, it was good overall. I believe that it could have been better, but I think the reason why Red Bull chose him over Tsunoda was because apparently his race pace was good. Because although his qualifying performances were at points middling, his race pace was apparently much better. And also, you could argue the fact that we already know how Tsunoda is going to do. He's had the chances to mature. He's had the chances to develop. Whereas Lawson hasn't had that. Lawson has a much higher ceiling. He has a much higher potential. And although Tsunoda is going to turn into a Jean-Eric Vergne 2.0, being snubbed for 2 seats at Red Bull now, actually, no, maybe not 2 seats, but he could end up being snubbed for 2 seats if Lawson and Hadjar get promoted in the next couple of years. If I was Red Bull, I don't know what I'd have done because the last time they promoted the inexperienced driver who, with less starts, aka Albon, and aka Gasly, it didn't work out well for them, and they had to get Perez in, who was a placeholder, and he's not done well because they should have brought in Kvyat in 2019. But if they've done the same thing again. They haven't learned from their mistakes. So either Lawson is better than Gasly and Albon ever were, or they're going to fall for the same trap again, and they're going to look back in 3 years and actually go, you know what, we should have put Tsunoda. And even if he is a Honda driver, even if we're no longer associated with Honda, we should have tried the guy who, although he was only there for Honda connection, we should have still tried it. And they could be looking at this in a few years' time and thinking, why are we so stupid?
And another point I want to make is Liam is known for his adaptability. He is able to adapt well to any machinery. And about 2023, I think Yuki was unlucky in some races. And at the Italian Grand Prix, he did not start the race because his car failed on him. And in Singapore, he had some sort of issues. I can't really remember what. I mean, given that 2023 season was so unbelievably boring, despite that one race in Singapore. Some of the races were so unforgettable. But anyway, so he had an issue, and Lawson, I think is a good driver. I think he's great, but I fear that I just hope that he doesn't go the same path as Pierre Gasly or Alexander Albon, where he gets absolutely humiliated by Max Verstappen, because we have seen that from Gasly and Albon. Gasly was a bit hot-headed, while Albon was just too mid. But hopefully he doesn't fall into the trap of winning, challenging Max, and hopefully becomes his noble steed. But let's see what happens, because it's quite interesting to see how well he performs in that machinery. And about Tsunoda, I want to say, what you said about him keeping on beyond 2025. Like, if you look at, you're right. Like, if you look at the business point of view, it would not make sense to keep him any longer, because Red Bull is gonna use Ford engines in 2026. Honda's gonna leave after the 2025 season, so they're gonna have to drop him after that season. And also, you also have another talent on the way, who I believe is making his F2 season. So if you look at the business point of view, you have to ask yourself, is it really worth it to keep a driver who's going into his 5th season into Formula One and who hasn't made a name of himself? But also, I've also seen reports that there have been disagreements between Marco and Horner as to whether to promote Yuki Tsunoda to the main team or not.
Well, there's always arguments between Horner and Marco. Yeah. They always seem to disagree with each other in the media, and then there seems to be no reason why they get along with each other. But yeah, it's a bit crap, because obviously you said there's a guy coming in F2 this season. I think you mean Arvid Lindblad.
Yeah,
the guy who just won F3.
I didn't want to pronounce his name.
That's fine.
I wanted to pronounce his name correctly, but I didn't want to pronounce it wrongly.
Yeah, that's fine.
I know. Yeah.
He's been basically the thing in F3 this season, because you had guys like Mini, Forner-Rodley, who won the championship despite not winning a single race, and not having won a single race in his junior career, I think since 2021, from memory. And there was someone else who I think finished ahead of Lindblad, but overall, Lindblad was the driver that everyone's looking at this season, because he's literally, I think even going into this season, he's 17 years old. He's got loads of time. 16. Is he still 16?
No. Oh, yeah. Going into next season, he's 17, but he won. I mean, he won his double feature. He won the double. He did the double at Silverstone as a 16-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's definitely Red Bull's next biggest thing. Obviously, we didn't really talk about Hadjar, because obviously we're going to talk about him later. But yeah, Lawson, I believe, I want him to do well. I want him to do what Perez couldn't do, what Gasly couldn't do, what Ricciardo couldn't do, what Albon couldn't do. But at what point do you realize it's become an inevitability? Unless you get another generational talent like a Lindblad, who could potentially become that. Like, it's just that at this point, it's just throwing shit at the wall until it sticks. And I don't think it's going to stick again. As long as he can do better than what Sergio did and just kind of sit there getting places like 1 or 2 positions behind Max, maybe a couple about 10, 15 seconds off him behind the racers, that'll be fine. But especially if Red Bull we saw them towards the end of the season basically drop off in terms of performance, or not towards the end of the season, but after the start of the season, they became either the second or third or fourth quickest car at some points. And if they are down in the midfield, or in the no man's land between Ferrari and McLaren and whoever is the next fastest team like Mercedes or Alpine, I mean, you need to have 2 drivers working together. Like if Perez had had a 2024-esque season, next season when they have more, when they have more to fight for in terms of points and stuff around them, that could have been shocking. They could have lost 2 or 3 positions in the standings. So hopefully, at least Lawson can do that. On to you, Nav.
At least let's keep the Red Bull theme going, and just talk about the breaking news from a few days ago, which wasn't really breaking news because everyone was kind of getting the rumors and insights from the paddock. Isaac Hadjar will be the third French driver on the grid in 2025. And correct me if I'm wrong, I've seen reports, I don't want to say this as a fact, but I think he's the first Arabic descent or Arab. Well, I don't want to get into politics. Does Algeria count? But basically, you get what I mean. Arabic descent driver in Formula One, because the Moroccan driver we had in Formula One in 1958 wasn't Moroccan. He was French, basically. Yes, Blue Guy?
No, I was gonna say something else about him, talking about his performance. Unless you want to finish
Okay.
it off.
Well, just to finish on Hadjar, I believe he might be the first Arabic descent driver in the sport, which could be huge. Obviously, Esteban Ocon also has Algerian heritage. So this is quite major in some unexpected way, because obviously he is French. He will be racing under the French flag, but I believe his dad or his mum are Algerian, so it's quite close. So that will be quite a momentous event for the sport. But in terms of his pure pace, actually, he is a fast guy, but he mostly does headlines for some more annoying reasons, which, just like his future teammate Yuki Tsunoda, it's team radios. It's extremely well. While Yuki Tsunoda's team radios are just kind of entertaining, Isaac Hadjar's are actually grating. And I say this even as a French speaker who knows how strong the French accent can be for some French speakers when they speak in English. When he starts ranting with his extremely strong French accent, it is absolutely grating. So the Formula One fans who are not used to that, they will have to get used to that. And Yuki will have to get used to a guy who obviously has high ambitions for himself. I'm sure that Isaac thinks he can eventually make it to Red Bull. So, yeah, what do you make of that promotion? Is he the right choice at that point? Do you think maybe RB should have gone for Colapinto, or just going for your own prospects is always the best choice?
Um, about Hadjar, I mean, I was having a discussion with someone, and that's how I was able to understand a little bit more about him. I think he's known for his work ethics, if I'm correct. If not, he's a good driver. I mean, he can perform well when he has the best machinery. Obviously, F1, F2. Anyway, Hadjar. There were chances where Hadjar should have won, but I don't think his radio messages deteriorate from his performances, because I mean he gets a bit angry if something bad happens to him, but since he's going to be driving a Red Bull sister team, I would say he needs to tone down the radio messages, because I don't think it's gonna with these messages, I don't think he's gonna have a good image. And as for other drivers signing for Racing Bull, as you mentioned, Nav, I don't. The last thing Red Bull needs is a Nick DeVries situation. That the last, basically, we don't. Red Bull, I think, don't want that to happen, and I think the next best thing is Isaac Hadjar. So, I, So for 2025, I hope he matches Yuki's pace.
It's good that you mentioned the team radius, because the point I was making is that Yuki was apparently regarded quite badly by Christian Horner in terms of the image he gives with his rants on the radio and his swearing. So if Hadjar thinks he can make it to Red Bull, he will have to turn it down. So Hadjar, he finished second in the Formula 2 championship this year, behind obviously Gabriel Bortoleto, who we'll talk about later as well. But Hadjar was in his second season, so it's not as impressive as it could have been. But again, I think he will be performing quite well, and he will be stacked up against the perennial benchmark that is Yuki Tsunoda. It's going to be interesting to see where he really is, because I'd say Hadjar is the one who's hardest to gauge at the moment in terms of pure pace. We don't really have an idea as well. We don't have as much of an idea as some of the other drivers. We know who might be slower or faster, but it's a bit hard for Hadjar. He could be really fast, like he could be a bit disappointing. So Ace, what do you want? What do you have to add on Isaac?
And I think he's quite the lucky guy to get the drive. So he was the survivor of a purge either last year or a few years ago in the Red Bull Driver Academy. Then he's going to
It was in February this year. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. He's going basically to the junior team of Red Bull, so the fact he has this team radio where he... I don't have a good word to explain it, but I would have one in Italian. And this behavior is a bit tolerated in the Red Bull family, so mother and sister team. And then he's up against Yuki Tsunoda, which clearly is not as bad as a teammate as other drivers could get. Like Antonelli is going to get George Russell, Lawson is getting Max Verstappen, so good luck with that. And even Bearman, he's getting Esteban Ocon. And Esteban Ocon, we saw that can be a very good driver.
And even Doohan is getting Gasly, who's full of confidence at the moment, so that's not easy at all either.
Yeah, exactly. So Bortoleto is getting Nico Hülkenberg, so that's also... Yeah, I guess Hadjar has the easiest job out of all the junior drivers. He's also the guy who gets the seat after 3 years in Formula 2 without winning the title. So really, not a lot of expectations, but everything is set up in such a way that he can perform well this year. So it's up to him, really.
What do you think, Nedzo, on Isaac, before we kind of move on? Because obviously Hadjar, he will be stacked up against one of your favorite drivers, Ollie Bearman, and I think that will be one of the closest comparisons he will actually get, because just like Bearman's second season and the prospect of a big team.
Well, personally, I've always said this, that Isaac Hadjar is a big-nosed French gimp. And don't get me wrong, he is fast, and he's clearly shown he has some potential. But for me, his demeanor and the way he goes about things, this mentality that he's the best thing of all time, and that, like, when he went at Monaco, when he lost that feature race win, or it might have been a feature, it might have been a sprint race, but when he lost that, and it was a BS situation. It was very lucky from Zach O'Sullivan to get a pit stop when he did, but it was like, oh, this isn't fair, man. No. Shut up, stop complaining, and just finish the race. I don't care if it's Monaco. It's F2. Stop crying, you little... genuinely, I don't see how people haven't realized that this is like when other people have been aggressive and they've been agitated over the radio, people like your prime Sebastian Vettels, your Max Verstappen's, your James Hunt's. Obviously he wasn't over the radio, he was just, his demeanor in general was quite out there and very provocative, but they did it in a way that endeared them to the fans. Like Vettel got a lot of fans for his arrogance, Verstappen's got a lot of fans for his arrogance and the fact that he can back his performances up, or he can back his shit talk up. Hadjar, don't get me wrong, he's been a bit unlucky, but so have many other drivers in F2, and he lost that title because he stalled. Yes, it's bullshit that the F2 cars don't have anti-stall, but no other driver stalled in that race. No other driver has had the problem that he had, And although I agree that it should be answered, that's the kind of things that the best drivers clutch up in those situations, and he didn't. And I think that's why he is not as good as people say he is.
I want to quickly jump in before I give Aisha the mic. You talked about stalling in Formula 2. Coincidentally, I was rewatching the 1999 season review in F1, and the amount of stalls the F1 drivers had back then. It was unbelievable. And I'm surprised that the anti-stall isn't a thing in Formula 2. So this given that F1 has advanced a lot, you would think that F2 and F3 would have similar technologies as F1. So it's just really a shame. And I know I've heard Peter talk about stalling and anti-stall. So he's right about that. It destroys many drivers' careers, and this is something that needs to be addressed. And that's all I have to say about it.
Just a word on what you said. So 1990s, the year nobody finished the races. So anti-stall, I can easily imagine how many drivers stole the car. Just with how unreliable those are, they cannot even make a good anti-stall or even a good launch system. Okay, I got the word. And about Hadjar, just last thing, I swear, if he does an iconic team radio where he just lambast a random driver, like what Alonso did to Hamilton in Spa 2 years ago, oh, I'm gonna love that. Just want to point it out because, yes, I swear if he does such an iconic team radio, I'm gonna love the guy.
And I'm certain he's going to do it because he is going to be in the lower midfield. And whether we want it or not, most of the good action happens in the lower midfield. So he will be fighting, especially with all the rookies that are there. He's bound to get into some kind of chaotic fights with the likes of Doohan and the Williams drivers. So that will be entertaining for sure. I think we have pushed it too back. We have pushed back the conversation on perhaps one of the weirdest additions to the 2025 grid, and that's Jack Doohan. How long do we think he's gonna last? Because with Perez out, he will be in a close competition with Lance Stroll, I believe, in terms of who will perform relatively the poorest. And I do not think it's going to be Lance who will be struggling more because Lance has a decent 2024. Even with all the banter, he didn't crash as much, even though towards the end of the year he was making mistakes. Doohan, he's not a driver who crushes, but he's also just so unimpressive and boring. So what do you think, Nedzo?
I think that when you look at guys who have come through the F2 ranks and had a couple of F1 starts, you tend to group them into a couple of categories. The guys who are first season F2 champions are obviously the next greats, your Piastris, your Russells, your even if it's guys like Norris, for example, who the only reason he didn't finish first was because he was in a stacked grid. Those kind of guys you see as the next best thing. Those who are champions in second season, okay, fine, fair enough. Sometimes people take a bit longer to get to it. I mean, even the guys like Mick Schumacher, although they weren't the best, they weren't horrendous in Formula One. But to be a third season champion, that's when people start saying, actually, you're not good enough. You just had the experience over everyone else, like Drugovich, like I don't think Nick De Vries was a third season champion, but other guys from history like Valsecchi and Pantano, people like that.
Third season.
What did you say?
De Vries was third season, yeah.
Oh, he was third season, okay. But Jack Doohan spent, okay, yes, he spent 2.5 seasons realistically, but he spent pretty much 3 seasons in F2 and got a best result of third. Like, I don't know how he's managed to fall upwards into a Formula One seat. Like, yes, he's the only Alpine junior that's anywhere near the level of Formula One, but just hire from outside. There's going to be some French driver who you can get from somewhere else. Like, or even if you don't want a French driver, someone like, for example, Paul Aron, who's this season, don't get me wrong, Paul Aron isn't the best driver in F2 or hasn't been the best driver in F2, but he finished third in his first season. He's instantly a better junior driver than Doohan ever was. Just put him in the car. I don't know. Doohan, brought him. They announced him mid-season, and I think that's just because I didn't think anything else was going to come up. If they'd have waited till the end of the year, like any other normal team does when they don't know who to pick, they'd have realised actually no, Colapinto's good. There's other drivers we can get. Ciaron, although he had a fumble towards the mid part of the F2 season, grew towards the end and started becoming better. There are so many better options than Doohan. And people who, like, don't get me wrong, he didn't crash in his Abu Dhabi weekend. Well done. Now drive better. Now drive to the car's potential rather than finishing half a minute off your teammate and qualifying miles behind him. Utter idiocy that he's anywhere near a Formula One seat.
Completely different opinion for me. So I actually like that Doohan is here. Peter put it best once. He explained usually in the past the third drivers did some years with track testing, simulator work inside the team, and then they get premiati, they get rewarded with a full-time drive for a year if they do well for longer. And clearly, we haven't seen this in a very long time. And it's nice to see that Doohan is the guy who got rewarded for this. Not specifically because he's Doohan, just because somebody got rewarded for it. Even if it was just an exploit by Flavio Briatore, which I just want to point out, is Jack Doohan's manager. So yeah, anyway, I was gonna say I like that Jack Doohan got a drive, that he will drive for at least 5 races next year if the rumors are to be trusted. And anyway, I like to see the guy on the grid. I remember back in Formula 3, Formula 2, he was quite hyped. I did not follow Formula 2, Formula 3 back then, so I cannot judge personally. I don't expect anything from him. If he does well, I will be satisfied. If he doesn't do well, it's a place for Colapinto. So it's a win-win really for me. So really, I have nothing against Doohan.
I just want to quickly say that I have nothing to say about Doohan. Obviously, I barely paid attention to him even before his journey to F1. I believe the F1 British press are praising him a bit too much, and I've seen a lot of people saying that they don't rate him either. So I just don't have anything to say about him. Obviously, and as Ashil said, I can't judge him because I didn't watch F2 and F3 at the time.
So in Formula 3, he finished second, but that was to Dennis Hauger, who I believe was also in his second season, but I cannot confirm that. But he finished second quite a bit behind Hauger, and we've seen how unimpressive Hauger was in Formula 2. So Doohan, there's nothing bad about him. He's just a bit middling. I would put him on par with Zhou, if not slightly slower. I'd say on par with Zhou is kind of fair. But it's just in this current grid, which is extremely competitive, having Doohan just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb because we're getting some extremely talented drivers getting promoted. And it seemed like we had moved away from these pity promotions. So the kind of drivers who finish 4th or 5th in Formula 2 and you just give them a chance. No, the drivers we're promoting at the moment are champions and stars of the future. So as we talked about, Bearman and Hadjar, that's top 3 drivers. Well, I think that's a good moment to talk about the actual Formula 2 champion this year, Gabriel Bortoleto, who actually is the opposite of Doohan. Doohan is extremely polarizing as a driver. Some people think he can be on the grid, it's fine, and some people think he didn't deserve it at all. Bortoleto is one of those drivers that everyone realistically wanted on the grid because not only did he win in Formula 2 as a rookie, which that's the biggest guarantee of a Formula 1 seat ever. There should be a rule that if you win Formula 2 as a rookie, you are on the grid. It would have been disgusting to not see him there. And he did make it, but some people might not be aware that he also won Formula 3 as a rookie after being quite middling in FRECA before that. And after being a FIAC something, FIACFK, whatever, karting world champion for one of the categories for Alonso's team. So he's been contracted to Alonso's management team since 2019, I believe. He was one of the very first drivers to join that management team along with Nikola Tsulov. And now Bortoleto is in Formula One with Sauber, which is fantastic to see. So big things are expected of him. Obviously, he is the first Brazilian driver on the grid, full-time Brazilian driver on the grid since Felipe Nasser. Pietro Fittipaldi was there for 2 races, but no one really cared, not even the Brazilians. So Brazil has a lot of hopes resting on Bortoleto. We know how close Brazil is to Formula One with the likes of Senna, Piquet, Fittipaldi, Massa, Barrichello. So my 2 questions are: do we think Bortoleto is going to have anywhere near a legacy as some of the drivers I mentioned? And secondly, is Sauber/Audi the best place for him to prosper?
The way I see it, will he have a legacy as good as Senna and Piquet and Fittipaldi? Is in terms of achievements, I think he could get a championship if his career goes the correct way. But like Senna for Brazil is Formula One, and to say that he could get up to that level, especially considering that F1 has this weird fetish for Senna in 2024, like all the stuff they've done over the past season or so, I think it'd be pretty much impossible. It'd be an uphill battle to try and get that. And yeah, I mean, the fact that he's gone to Sauber when he was a McLaren Junior, I'm not sure if he's still a McLaren Junior and he's just on loan at Sauber. But yeah, I mean, it's better than nothing. But the fact that he's gone there is basically because no other team, all of the teams were full up, essentially. And I mean, he could have gone to Alpine, but sending a junior driver to a works outfit never usually happens. Like, you wouldn't see a Williams junior driver go to Mercedes or any of the other bigger independent teams go to, send one of their drivers to another works team, because it just doesn't work, essentially. So yeah, I'd say.
And again, calling Alpine a works team is a stretch, because what the hell are they?
Yeah, for now they're still a works team because they're still powered by Renault and they're all based at Renault. But when they become Alcedes, that won't be the case. But yeah,
and I imagine they'll rebrand as High Tech for 2026.
Yeah, they could even do that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Aron got a seat there. But I was going to say, yeah, Bortoleto, he's definitely got the potential to be a champion. But of all of the prospects we've talked about, your Hadjars, your Bearmans, your Antonellis, even we haven't got to him yet. But he's the most unknown, because Antonelli, for example, has had a free practice session and we saw a glimpse of what he's capable of. Bortoleto's flown completely under the radar, and he could, like, it's plausible to say that he could come in, batter Nico Hulkenberg into the outer stratosphere, and become a future champion and go to Ferrari or Mercedes or Red Bull. But at the same time, he could also just flop.
I'm very satisfied that Bortoleto got the drive for next year, because it was not guaranteed at all. I wanna remind everybody that he was contracted to the McLaren Formula One Academy, so he would have had to wait for a place inside McLaren to get a drive. And clearly, given the current situation at McLaren, that was not gonna happen anytime soon, unless Piastri or Norris left. Why would they? So the fact that McLaren was, I say kind, obviously they got something out of that, but anyway, Bortoleto was allowed to leave and to go to Sauber to get a first year in a team with no real expectations against an established driver, so it's not even expected to beat him. And that's very good for Bortoleto. I actually came across him very early, I say early, 2021. I first came across him in Freca. First year he was in the FA14, basically Alonso's team in Freca. Very uncompetitive team. And he was against an Andrea Rosso. I bet nobody knows who him correctly, because he left soon after. And he didn't get many remarkable results. He got a second year at Freca, did not win the championship, and then just went on to Formula 3 with no expectations, won it first year, went to Formula 2 with some expectations, but definitely not to win it first year. He does, and immediately gets the drive for next year. Piastri did not get the drive for next year. Piastri had to wait at Alpine and in 2023 before getting a seat not 2023, 2022 at Alpine before getting a seat for the next year, even at another team, so not even the one. So really, I'm very glad Bortoleto had not to suffer for that. He got a full-time drive with no expectations. What more can one ask for? So we will see what he does next year. I hope he does well. He should be doing well because everything he showed this year is very promising.
Interesting comments that you've made. I first learned a little bit more about Bortoleto when people started talking about him around July, August, around that time. And from what I've learned, he's a very good qualifier. Obviously, I can't fully judge him, but given that he's a great qualifier, hopefully he can make some standout moments in that Sauber. Obviously, that Sauber is very anonymous, so I don't expect him to pull out a P3, but hopefully he does well in that car to prove that he deserves to be on that grid. And hopefully, and if he does extremely well in this sport, he could be a world champion potential.
Yeah, especially as he is Brazilian, and if we saw the support that Colapinto got as an Argentinian, having a proper good Brazilian driver, it's not only good for the sport. It's not only good for Brazilians, but it's also just good for the sport. I can't remember. Well, growing up, there was always a Brazilian driver at the top competing. Well, that was until obviously Alonso started mauling Felipe, but it was weird for nearly a decade to not have a Brazilian driver on the grid. So that will be good, and it will be interesting to see if Audi chooses to stay with Bortoleto, should Bortoleto perform well next to Hulkenberg. Well, we've kept the best for last, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, sorry, who will be joining Merck, and that is again we said that Lawson joining Red Bull straight, well, as a rookie kind of is the first time that has happened since Lewis Hamilton, but we don't have to extrapolate in this manner because Antonelli is doing exactly what Lewis Hamilton did, which is join a top team first year, straight from Formula 2/GP2, even though Antonelli did not win, obviously. I think he finished 6th in the standings in the end. What do we expect from him? Because he will be stacked up against a very, very strong George Russell in 2024. George will want to make that team fully his. He's been waiting to do this since 2021, probably. And he will just be so fired up to show that this rookie cannot do anything against him. Of course, George being George, he's tried to be polite and big up Kimi in the press conferences and in the interviews he's been giving. But do not make a mistake about it. George wants to absolutely demolish Antonelli. So yeah, Antonelli will be. Will he be 19 or 18 going into this? No, he will be 18 going into the season because he's August 2006. So he will be 18 going into the season. What do you guys expect from him, Nedzo?
I expect him to, at least at the start, he'll struggle. I think that he'll be not considerably behind George, but I think he'll be started like not really there and thereabouts. But after, I'd say, the 5th or 6th race, it's usually the case that drivers after 5 or 6 races in a new environment, even if they are a rookie, they tend to do better. And I think by the end of the season,
it will not be a case of 2007 Australia where Lewis overtook Alonso in the first turn. You don't think it will be Antonelli dive bombing George in the exact same way?
No, because Kimi hasn't had 8 million years of testing with Mercedes, and I don't want to sound like Ciaron here, but Bridgestone tires, and he hasn't had everything that Lewis had as pretty much the most prepared rookie, apart from maybe Jacques Villeneuve. Kimi doesn't have that. He's had, or Andrea, should I say, he doesn't have that because everyone seems to call him Kimi when that's his middle name instead of his first name. No one calls Lewis Hamilton Carl David Hamilton. But anyway, aside from my little rant there, Kimi we had that one practice session in Monza, and I think he competed in Abu Dhabi as well, but everyone forgot about it. And we had that crash. Pretty stupid of them to put him on soft tires and aim for 1 lap pace when he's a literal rookie and he wants to prove himself. And he's an 18-year-old. At that time, he just turned 18 as well. I think that by the end of the season, if he's matching George or even a 10 or 2 behind, he can look at himself and say it's a job well done. Even if he is at the start of the season well off, but improves towards the end of the season, he's young. He's going to progress. He has had a middling F2 season in terms of results. Maybe not in terms of performance because we don't know how good Premier have been. At times they've been arguably the worst team, and at times they've been nowhere near the best. So we don't really know where they stand in terms of overall performance. So I'd say Kimi Antonelli or Andrea Kimi Antonelli just needs to establish himself. He doesn't need to try and do what Lewis Hamilton did because he doesn't have the experience that Lewis Hamilton did at this point, although they're both rookies and although they both haven't done an F1 start. He just needs to realise his potential. He needs to realise that George Russell is no slouch. He's beat Lewis Hamilton 2 years out of 3, and in 2023 was basically on the same pace in terms of overall performance. He needs to realise that the teammate he's going up against is a future champion. If not, even if he's a massive Tory gimp, he is a very good driver. So all Kimi needs to do, or I keep saying Kimi because it's so easy to do, all Antonelli needs to do is establish himself and not crash all the time, not do what Colapinto did in his latest stints. If he can just do early Colapinto and then develop from there, he could prove himself as a potential future champion.
Yeah, I kind of wish Kylin Smith was here because that is an argument worth listening. Anyway, about Kimi Antonelli, I mean, he has a lot of expectations because he's in what used to be a front-running team, and he was able to get that seat because Lewis is now going to Ferrari for 2025, and this was something nobody expected to happen. And I mean, he isn't all that, but in F2, I mean, he had one sprint race and one feature race, correct?
He won one sprint, I think it was in. Oh, I can't remember which race it was.
Silverstone.
Oh yeah, Kimi. Yeah, he won the Silverstone, and then did he win a race in Zandvoort, or am I thinking wrong?
Hungary. Feature
Hungary,
race,
yeah.
Hungary, I believe. Yeah. So, and the Prema wasn't the best machinery. So, I would say the same thing as you. But one thing I would like to say that he's entering a different sport. Like, this isn't a sport where I had. What's the word? I keep forgetting. In-season testing and a tire war, and obviously testing is limited, and he's up against a teammate who was up against Hamilton when he joined in 2022. So he wants to make sure that his team is here. So my expectations are low for Antonelli. So because he's a bit young, and I fear that he will collapse drastically if he wants to be George Russell in the first race. So what I would say is try not to beat your teammate first. I mean, if you can, well done. But if you want to improve, just try and understand the machinery, do well. Just don't be like Mick Schumacher or Nick de Vries. And if you do reach George's pace, George isn't going to be very nice on the track. So try and find a way to outsmart him.
Yeah, I really want to stress how much George has been waiting for this opportunity. I don't think that anyone saw Alonso and Lewis stay for this long. And I think that George probably thought that as from maybe Lewis would win 2021 and would retire having won his 8th, and that George would be the future as from 2022. I'm sure that, Russell knows that he was the Mercedes wonder kid, and he already felt that he waited too long at Williams. So I don't think he thought he wouldn't get the full reins of the team until 2025. So on his 7th full season in Formula One, he will really be gunning, and he will want to prove to everyone that he is faster than all his peers, all the peers of his generation. So Leclerc arguably is now more popular and is seen as faster. Norris, for many, was the better driver over the last few years. That's another debate. So I think that George really wants to prove to everyone how fast he really is, because let's not forget that Russell is the one who beat Norris and Albon in the 2018 Formula 2 season, and he was the one who was the bigger prospect out of that bunch. So without further ado, I will let Ace talk about his favorite driver for the next few years, Antonelli, because if Nedzo loves Ollie, Ace absolutely loves Kimi.
Exactly.
You're right about that.
So, the discussion around Antonelli, but to be fair, it is more general. It is worth for every driver. So, okay, what's the discussion? The discussion is next year we're gonna have basically 6 rookies. That's basically unprecedented in recent modern Formula One history. I don't actually have any stats verified, but I
It
cannot
happened in
remember.
2015. It happened in 2015, but 2015 had the likes of Roberto Merri, so it's not as relevant.
Okay. So anyway, 6 rookie drivers in 1 year, and the point is the year is 2025. 2025 is the last year of a rule set in which the cars are easy to drive. What does easy mean? It's something that was explained by Alonso once this year, and then it was a team principal, I think it was Vowles, Williams team principal, or somebody else. Basically, at another question on the rookies, he just said that he went back to what Alonso said, and Alonso said these cars are not linear to drive, in the sense you can push the car 100% to everything it's worth of, and then you don't get a lap time. Or you can instead just don't push, go 90% of the car's capability, and because at 90% the car always works inside its working window, you're very fast, you get a lap time. And so for rookies that don't immediately go to 100%, they go steady and slowly and don't go to the maximum. They look immediately fast on these cars. And we saw that with Lawson, we saw that with Bearman, we saw that with Colapinto. And the point I'm trying to make is maybe next year we see 6 rookies, and all 6 rookies are impressive because they're immediately on the pace, they immediately start to get good results. And then we go to 2026, which is a completely different format, different engines, different rule set, different behavior inherent of the car, completely different everything. And these drivers, everything they have learned for 2025, they come to 2026 and there's nothing that they have learned. They have to relearn everything from scratch. So basically, there'll be rookies again, except to the eye of the public. They won't be rookies. They are expected to be better than 2025. Currently, there is no reason to believe that 2026 cars will be easy to drive. Maybe it's completely different. Maybe we get something like 2007, where Lewis Hamilton, the fact he was a rookie, wasn't as bad as it would have been in other years, because also many other drivers had to relearn a lot of things. And instead, for 2007, it was positive for the rookies. Maybe the fact that these rookies debut in 2025 won't be beneficial, because it will take away the chance to learn in 2026 by being a rookie. So what I'm trying to get is, please don't judge these drivers immediately. Wait until 2027. Give them 3 full years. Give them the 2 years. They can do whatever the fuck they want. They can crash the car into the wall every race. They can quali 3 seconds off the pace of the teammate. In 2026, they can again suck. If in 2027 they're up to pace, excellent. If they're not, there'll be a massive disappointment. But give them 3 years. Maybe it is this course doesn't matter much for Bortoleto, which goes to Cyber, there are no expectations. Not for Doohan, who just doesn't have expectations in general for most of the public. Maybe not for Hadjar, that comes quite experienced in a easy environment, so to say. But for Antonelli, who's going to a top team against a top driver and expected to behave immediately like the new Lewis Hamilton, immediately fighting for the championship, it's just absurd. And I fear Antonelli will have...
Ace, I'm sorry to say it. When Antonelli will outqualify George, he will be the next Lewis. And if he crushes, he will be the biggest flop since Mazepin. And you will like it, whether you want it or not, because that is the Formula One narrative. But I fully agree with what you said.
Yeah, that's sums up the F1 fan base nowadays. I want to talk about the point that you mentioned about how cars are so easy to drive. I mean, if someone who has done little to no testing and is able to drive that car perfectly and is able to match their teammates, I mean, that's amazing. But at the same time, it's a bit concerning. Like if the current Formula One cars are a lot easier than the F2 or F3 cars, then that's a bit concerning. That's a problem because back then F1 cars were a lot difficult to drive. And I mean, as for 2026, it's gonna be a lot interesting because the DRS is going to be replaced by some sort of system, and the balance of the car is gonna change drastically when driving it. So every team has its own merits. So some of these rookies that are gonna be in 2025 could be gone in about a year or two.
I think the problem is another one. The problem isn't that these drivers are immediately up to pace, so the problem is there is a concern that the grid we had from basically 2010 to 2020, at least for 10 years, the rookies we were getting were just lower grade than whatever we were getting before or after. So in general, the worth of the grid, there is this theory, I say, that in general just these drivers were never as good as Alonso and Hamilton, which meant Alonso and Hamilton have a longer shell life, not because they actually have a longer shell life, just because the grid is worse than back in their days. So they still look competitive just because the grid is worse. And so now that we're no longer getting these lower quality drivers, we see rookies beating the experienced ones. I cannot vouch for how true any of this is. It's just a theory, maybe it's true. I guess it's a nice theory, and I just wanted to point it out that not necessarily there is this certainty that these cars are easy to drive. Maybe the issue is another. So what were you saying?
But we had some low quality drivers this year, right?
We had the Sergeant, but he was no rookie. We had Joe, but so Joe is this weird case scenario because clearly, from everything we heard in Qatar, basically he disliked the Sauber car of 2024 immensely. He just could not drive it, which you hear it in the radio at the end of the Qatar race. And you hear this. He says, "Thank you, guys. Thank you for this car. I told you that I would have paid back for everything I didn't deliver up until now. And I'm very glad that I could get these points because it proved that I wasn't the problem. It was always the car."
Yeah,
And
given
we kind of see it that there is weird problem that some drivers just cannot drive these cars. You see Lewis Hamilton just doesn't know why he's low in the qualifying. And we had Joe, which meant completely unnoticed because the Sauber was nowhere. But Joe had the same problem. He was massively off Bottas' pace and for no apparent reason. Then last 3 races and he's there with Bottas. So yeah, Joe is this weird case scenario in which it was never excellent, to be honest, but clearly this year he had a problem with the car. So Sargent is bad. Joe, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know how much you rate Perez and Stroll, but clearly also Perez has the same problem. He cannot get to grips with this car. I mean, he was semi-good in 2021. He was nowhere near this bad. So that there is this other issue in this current car. I don't know what the issue is. Maybe nobody will ever know.
I mean, given how anonymous Sauber was in 2024, this doesn't surprise me at all. As for Paris, I'm just gonna leave it by that by giving you Lance's team radio in Japan earlier this year, and I'll let you figure that out.
I don't remember the team radio. What did he say?
How it was in a different league, different series. I don't know exactly what he said, but he said
So
that
I'm going by memory. Japan was the Suzuka floor the Aston Martin brought, and the Suzuka floor did not flop. Okay, no. It kind of flopped, but considering everything else that happened that year, it was a massive success. So the expectations for the Suzuka floor at Aston Martin that day in Japan were an improvement of 0.2 of a second. They got a bit more than 1/10 of a second out of that floor. So in that sense, it didn't correlate to their expectations. But I do remember Alonso saying on the radio at the end of the race, this car is so much easier to drive. I can actually push and this car responds. Which is the entire reason why they kept using this floor until the end of the year. Because on this floor, Alonso could actually do his own stuff, like not pushing immediately, then starting to push, holding a gap to preserve the tires to push later on. He could not do that on the Bahrain floor. He could not do that, for the love of God, on the Imola floor. It was a massive flop for Alonso. But even the Austin floor was another massive flop. But the other floor which worked, which was the Hungary floor, Alonso wasn't as good. He was fast, but you saw that he struggled. On the Suzuka floor, it was completely different. You saw that day in Brazil with a car. Okay, Brazil was in November. The floor was April, so 7 months old car. Alonso was close to getting pole position until he fucked it into the wall. But if he hadn't fucked it into the wall, his pace, he was gonna get pole position on what was a few hours ago the 10th car from the grid as pace-wise, which is kind of insane. The Suzuka floor was completely different. The car behaved very well. It was slow, but it behaved very well. So I guess that it was Lance was saying, but I don't think it is just in that case a driver. It is literally just the car, because both drivers were very happy with the Suzuka floor.
Yeah, that was basically a preview for the 2024 season review. I have nothing to say after that. Will we move on, or does anyone else want to
Well,
make a point?
well, therefore, on Antonelli then, to bring it back round, where do you see him? How much will be the gap to George, basically, in terms of, obviously we don't know how fast the Mercedes will be, but relatively speaking, how much will the gap be? You can talk in terms of other driver gaps. So you could say it's going to be a Leclerc Sainz gap, or an Alonso Stroll gap, or a Tsunoda other RB driver gap. Where do you guys think it's gonna be, kind of?
It is a knock-on steroids, okay? That would be the gap. So I just explained a bit what the Ocon on steroids means. In 2022 especially, basically Ocon at his absolute best was slightly better than Alonso in qualifying. But what happened was that half of the time Ocon was at his absolute best and barely beating Alonso, and the other time he was way slower for no apparent reason. It was half a second off the pace of Alonso. Completely random, inconsistent. That is the issue with Ocon in general, I think, is that he's inconsistent. If he were to deliver to his best absolute possible, he could do a Rosberg 2016. Clearly would not be at the level of the other top level drivers, but he would be a threat to them. And Ocon as a threat is a serious one, because Ocon can pack a punch if he wants to. And anyway, what I was saying is that Antonelli, and we saw it this year in Formula 2, is far too young. And being far too young means he just doesn't deliver. In the sense, sometimes he's very good, he's fast, he's everything he expected to be. Another time he's slow for no apparent reason. But the reason is obvious. He's 17 years old. He turned 18 years old. That's extremely young. No other driver in Formula 2 is as young as he is. No other driver in Formula 1 will be as young as he is. He has less experience than anybody else in the rookie categories. I expect him this year to see basically the same of what we saw this year in Formula 2. I expect him to sometimes be good, be close to Russell, and other times just be completely off the pace. That is what I mean with Ocon on steroids. Instead of being half a second off the pace, 7 times off the pace. And if he I don't think he will be ahead of Russell. I think when he's on the pace, he will be just slightly behind Russell. So basically a worse version of Ocon, but that's for the rookie year. I have no expectation whatsoever for 2026, as I already explained. I don't know how the car will affect the season. And then if he does get a drive for 2027, that will be when he's supposed to be judged on.
I would say that he would be off the pace at start, but I wouldn't say he would be drastically off the pace. I would say around 5/10, 6/10 to say the least. Obviously, I'm not good at gaps, but that is my prediction for that.
I think I said this earlier, but I think that he will be eventually by the end of the season. I think he'll gain up to a point where he's like maybe 1 or 2 tenths off. If he's staying in the ballpark of where George is by the end of the year, he can be happy with himself as a rookie going up against someone who is as accomplished and esteemed as George is.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I also think that he will be performing quite well as from mid-season, but it would take a lot for him to consistently beat George, and I think that Ace's comparison with Ocon is quite an accurate one. So we've looked at all the rookies we had in 2024 and what to expect in 2025. To close this off, which rookie do you think will be the rookie of the year next year? So that's not on preference, just who do you think that there is an award called the Lorenzo Bandini Trophy for the best rookie. Who do you think will win it? Because I think next year it's going to be, as Ace said, it's not going to be that important because some of the drivers will only be there maybe for a year, whereas Bearman, Antonelli, Bortoleto, they will most probably be there for longer than that, and they will mostly be gauged on their performance in the new car for 26, 27, 28 maybe. But who do you think will win that Bandini Trophy? So Nedzo first.
Bortoleto.
Blue guy?
I'm gonna go the same thing as Nedzo, Bortoleto.
Boring.
Ace?
I completely hate this kind of prize, premium, award, whatever it is called. Just it's gonna go to the guy on the best car. It's not gonna go to the best rookie. It's gonna go to the rookie who has the best car. If
Yeah.
Lawson is even double better than Perez has been this year, and being double better than Perez is a very low standard. That what I try to say. Lawson is gonna win it because I expect Red Bull to be better than Mercedes. If instead the Mercedes is an absolute wow, they finally go back to the winning years car, and of Antonelli is any better than what I expect him to be, it's gonna go to Antonelli. If Antonelli and Lawson will flop massively, then it's gonna go to the rookie who has the best midfield car. Is it gonna be the Haas because the Haas next year is the best, the midfield? Then it would be Bearman. If it goes to the Racing Bulls, it will be Hadjar, Bortoleto if the Sauber for whatever reason is good, Doohan if he gets to the end of the year, and Alpine is on the same trajectory that Briatore put it on. Really, it will go not to the best rookie driver, it will go to the rookie with the best car. So I see no reason to give a prediction.
You actually make a good point, and that was something I was thinking about before making that prediction. So I'm actually going to change my prediction and instead I'm going to say that Lawson is going to get the Rookie of the Year award.
Same. I feel like Lawson will maybe win a sprint or two, and they're just gonna give it to him because that will be better than Perez, and just on that basis, he will be considered to have a good season. Well, thanks a lot for joining me.
Wait. So since we're ending, I
Go
just
on.
want to make a conclusion about Formula 2 and Formula 3. Because
Go on.
at the start of the year, I already explained there were a lot of expectation of Formula 2, great grid, great drivers, new cars. It will be exciting. And nobody cared about Formula 3 because, to be honest, in Formula 3, the leftovers were left. Mini it was at his second year, same for Lindblad and for Naroli and Montoya and Mansell. And these were the best driver of the grid. And they were the drivers who didn't get the drive for Formula 2. So they were the rejects in a way. And I think nobody had any expectation for Formula 3. As we saw the Formula 3 season unfold this year, it completely sucked. It gave no reason at all for us to believe the grid was better than what we expected it to be, and that is quite bad. And then after the finale at Monza, some Formula 2 drivers, Formula 3 drivers got to drive the Formula 2 cars. Mansell, Goef, who somebody else, I don't remember. Anyway,
Beganovic did really well.
Beganovic, you're right, Beganovic. And anyway, they got the drive, and they were immediately on the pace of the other Formula 2 drivers. And I repeat, Formula 2 had an abysmal year, which completely betrayed the expectations. Well, actually, Formula 3 betrayed the expectations too. Formula 3 had an extremely good grid, just as good as this Formula 2 grid, and nobody gave a flying F about it. Just such a shame. I actually have now some expectations for next year. It's gonna have Mini, it's gonna have Fornaroli, it's gonna have Montoya, Mini Montoya,
Beganovic.
Beganovic, yes.
Vlad.
I think the real shame is that next year we don't see in Formula 2 Tuka Taponen. How many of you know of Tuka Taponen?
I've sort of heard of him, but I wouldn't say I'm knowledgeable about him.
He
Okay,
raced.
I saw Nedzo nodding, so he does know him.
He
So,
raced.
long story short, and can I briefly describe him? Best case scenario, Tuka Taponen is the next Antonelli. And he had a choice, best case scenario, okay? I'm not saying anything so impressive. Literally, best case scenario, he looks like the next Antonelli. And that is, Antonelli could flop next year. So I'm not setting an incredibly high bar. Antonelli wasn't the best Formula 2 driver this year, just to be clear. Anyway, Tuka Taponen is looking very promising. He had a choice to immediately go to Formula 2, and he didn't. He decided to go step by step, and so he will go to Formula 3 next year. And
Who
so
was the option for? Which team would it have been with?
let me check. I have Wikipedia opened. So Tuka Taponen is at, okay, reload the page, thank you. He's at Art Grand Prix. He is a teammate with James Wharton and Lawrence Van Open.
No, but would he have gone? Where would he have gone in Formula 2?
Oh, I don't know. I imagine
I guess Art as well.
Art
Yeah.
again.
Do you want to go, Neto, or will I talk?
I think I should go because the thing is with Tappinen, like he did a couple of F3 races this year, and he did Macau. He didn't seem that special to me. Like, yes, he was not bad by any stretch, but I haven't seen him in Freca, which is obviously I think the main bulk of where he's done. But for me, I haven't seen much. I didn't look at him and think, "Wow, this guy's going to be the next Antonelli." Like, I don't think that he might go on and prove me wrong, but for me, I haven't seen enough to say that he's an ex Antonelli or really, really good.
And those are great points. I'm basically repeating what Ciaron just said, and every time he hears about Formula 2, Formula 3. But based on what I heard, what are your predictions? Who will you be your top 3 for F2 and F3, assuming that you haven't made your top 3 yet?
Okay, so I'm going first. My extremely biased opinion is Fornaroli Mini. And I don't care about the third. Okay, my extremely biased opinion.
Italia, Victoria. Yeah.
And you, Nedzo?
I'd say, to be fair, I can't really give an accurate prediction for the top 3 because you look at mostly all of the guys coming in are rookies. Like, there's no real. I'd say maybe Paul Aron would be a chance at the title. I don't think Victor Martins is staying on, which is good. For all people who don't want terrorists to be in international racing series. Paul Aron is good. I'd go for. I can't think of any other drivers to say in my life. Like people like Beganovic and co like that. The guys coming up from F3, they're good, but for me, they're not special. So I was like Aaron first, and I don't care about F3 to be frankly honest. Like the likes of whoever's going up, but it's just like I'll watch a couple of races when I can, but they're always on at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I can never be bothered to watch any of them. So yeah, so I can't give much deep analysis on F2 and F3 predictions, but yeah.
It's kind of the same for me in terms of Formula 3, because who could have guessed Bonaroli winning the championship without winning a single race? But in Formula 2, again, you can't really give a prediction with how the teams are going now, how the cars and the engines are. You don't know who is going to have a no-P car or not. But of course, the ones you will have to keep an eye on would be Lindblad, Beganovic, Mini. They're the one. Martins obviously is going to come back. Aaron's going to come back. So those are the ones who are going to be up there. Now, do they have any chance of getting on to the 2026 grid? That's another thing. Ace, what do you anything to add?
Yes, two things to add. So first of all, maybe there's a chance to see any of these Formula 2 drivers on the grid for 2026. That's because recently Briatore said that in case they need a driver for 2026, they will look first at their own academy. And so that would narrow down the choice between among Victor Martens, Gabriele Mini, and Paul Aron. And all three will be in Formula 2 next year, so very interesting. Martins at his third year, Aaron at his second year in Formula 2, and Mini as a rookie. And the other thing is, yes, Fornaroli did not win any race, but that's not the full picture. It is not at all easy to win a race in Formula 3 because so much BS happens during the races. To cut it short, I was at Imola. I saw it live. Fornaroli was on a charge. He was going to win the race. And then out of nowhere, the car just slows down for a few corners, then picks it up, and that was enough for Fornaroli to lose the win. Otherwise, he was going to win the race. The Trident was the best car at Imola, but Fornaroli was also clear of his teammates. And instead, I think it was Megatunif who won the race. So anyway, we could have seen Fornaroli winning at his own race in Imola, and we didn't. He won the championship at Monza, so that kind of pays it off.
Well, thanks everyone for adding the Formula 2 and Formula 3 preview, which I guess, will also do in March. Well, thanks a lot for joining me on this weekend. Very last minute, by the way, for everyone listening. This was scheduled quite last minute for you to have a nice listen over maybe Boxing Day, Christmas afternoon, whichever you prefer. And of course, this is an occasion for me to wish all of you guys a Merry Christmas. We will be back, of course, just after this. Thanks very much for joining me, Nedzo, Ace, and Blue Guy. Very nice appearance for the first time. And you have been listening to the DRS Train podcast. You can find us on X, Spotify, and all kinds of socials, which I am not aware of, but we are probably there. See you soon.
Bye-bye.